What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And today we're talking about somebody named Lauda Leon, who was brought to my attention on today's live stream. I was actually planning to do my second and final installment of the Howdy McCoskey book, Empty the Cave. That'll still be coming later this week. But I saw this interview and I just thought it was so cool. She's got a very, very interesting story. And this is, again, from the Jeff Mara podcast. Now, I know some folks have been critical about leaning on NDEs for information, that NDEs can be manipulated. And of course, when you don't have that corroboration that we have with these great remote viewing teams, yes, of course, I acknowledge that manipulation can be there, even if the person, as in this case, seems extremely sincere. So we should take this with a grain of salt. I'll give you that. But that being said, this is not your traditional NDE account. It's very different. And I think the uniqueness, which merges with a lot of these stories and accounts that we've heard from remote viewing teams, is what I think starts to give it some credibility. Either way, take it for what it's worth. Very, very interesting information. And I want to share. There's a lot of very fascinating things in this account that I wanted to share and showcase with you guys. Now, first of all, who is Lauda Leon? So I pulled up a biography so you guys can figure out who she is or understand who she is. So she's also known as Sovereign Kai. That might be Chi, I'm not sure, but this is her YouTube channel. I checked on her YouTube channel. It looks like she hasn't made a video in about 4 months. So just for whatever reason, that may be the case. But anyway, she's a spiritual researcher, psychic counselor, trauma and anomalous experience profiler, spirit seer, and meta chi kinetics practitioner whose work focuses on consciousness, spiritual integration, quantum sovereignty, and liberation from limiting energetic or psychological systems. Through her Sovereign Key platform, she describes her life's work as helping people excavate soul memories, multidimensional experiences, created timelines, and deeper layers of personal trauma in order to reclaim sovereignty and self-emancipation. These are words that I think on this channel and in this community we've come to recognize as familiar. Her background blends intuitive and experiential work with the studies in psychology, anthropology, archaeology, and environmental politics. And she has appeared in interviews and podcasts discussing anomalous interference, near-death experiences, pre-birth memories, the matrix, nature of reality, and spiritual emancipation. By the way, that's also part of this. She does mention at one point her pre-birth memories and saying that the information that she was given ahead of time was not wiped from her memory. And she doesn't go into a lot of detail about it, but she does mention that it was not wiped in order for her to fulfill whatever her purpose or her mission is in this realm, in this simulacra, if you will. All right, without further ado, we got a lot of nuggets here. So I broke down the Jeff Mara podcast into some majorly important chunks. We're going to go through and we're going to check it all out. First clip. This is a long one, almost 5 minutes. My first NDE. I was in the deep. Now, I want you to pay attention to this because what she describes as the deep, I think maybe, this is just a theory, I have no idea. It sounds like what has been described as the Pleroma. Maybe. I don't know. And we're gonna talk about this a little bit more in subsequent clips. But anyways, take a listen and decide for yourself.
That's the first one I had when I was 13 and I drowned. And my experience as I was dying, and once I was dead, was a little bit freaky at the beginning because you hear everybody talking about seeing the light and seeing loved ones and expecting all that to happen. Well, that never happened. So when I died and I was clinically dead, it was completely dark. And at first it scared me because there was nothing there, but it wasn't a void because there was a comfort to it. And what I felt as I sat in that, and I knew I was dead, I could feel that nothing could attach to me. It was very distinct, like I could feel whatever was in existence here could not attach or get in. So it felt more like what I call the deep. And it felt like in that place, I could go and do anything.
Would you say it was velvety?
It felt comfortable and beautiful. it should have felt terrifying because it was pure black. Like as black, there's no words to describe it. But yeah, the feeling was like a deep, deep comfort and like a peace, an unknown peace that I just couldn't even describe. Like everything was right in creation, and I didn't have to go back into this story. I didn't have to be attached to, and nor could anything here be attached to me. So it felt like all of this was way beyond that place. And from that place, it felt like you could go anywhere and do anything.
Do you think this black place was somewhere within you, or do you think it was a completely different realm outside of your body?
No, I felt like it was outside of my body. And I felt like the feeling was that it wasn't simulacria. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you're in a type of digital reality or any kind of fabricated reality. It was outside of that. Almost like a creation point place. But I distinctly felt that everything associated with these matrices, this simulacrum, these lower astral realms, and I call them lower astral heavens, it was all in a place that was far from where I was.
Do you think that where you were is a jumping off point from there to all the other realms?
I do.
Almost like a vacuum?
Yeah, I do. I feel, because I knew in that moment. And I sat there. It was really weird because when I was dead, I mean, I'm dead. I don't have a body per se, but I had like a body in consciousness. And I remember sitting, and it just felt like I could go wherever I want right now, and I have to decide where I want to go. So yeah, it kind of felt like a jumping place, but it felt safe. Like a lot of the dark energies and the forces that operate here, that can be really terrifying, right? Because I've been attacked by a lot of weird forces growing up. None of those forces could access that place. So for whatever reason, none of this could attach to me, and I couldn't attach to it.
So many interesting things here. Number one, she's talking about this being a jumping off point, that she could go anywhere and do anything from that point. And that actually resonates with a couple of things. That resonates with something Jason Georgiani has mentioned, and also Intuitive Underground has mentioned, in the idea that once you exit successfully, it's effectively potentially a choose your own adventure existence. You take this jumping off point and you go where you choose to go, as opposed to being forced into a particular cycle and having your mind wiped through the cyclic existence, as it's called in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So very, very interesting that this notion resonates with that idea. The other thing that's fascinating is that she mentions those other entities were completely blocked from interacting with her. And what's so fascinating about that is a lot of times we call this the trap, or the soul trick, or the soul trap, or whatever, being in this simulacrum or this holographic universe, whatever it may be. And it's funny, the way she describes it here, she was able to exit, but the other entities, it was impossible for them to enter the other realm where she was. The Pleroma, I don't know, whatever that may be. So it's funny, it almost feels like we have it backwards, that maybe we're still figuring out how to get out right now, but to call it being trapped is actually maybe very, very much incorrect. Maybe it's difficult, but we can eventually leave. But the real entities that are trapped are the negative ones, the archons, the one in charge of the system. In fact, they're literally not able to leave. Whereas for us, we have to weave and wind our way through the manipulation, wake up effectively, and then we're able to exit. They are not. They're the ones that are truly trapped. And this is just, I'm just going with the flow here in terms of what she's saying. And obviously, I'm speculating a bit here, but that's sure what it sounds like. And so I just thought it was very, very interesting. And also this idea of there was no light. She didn't even get greeted with the light. I wonder, maybe because she does have previous knowledge, or maybe they knew it wasn't even going to work. They didn't even try, and she just boop, zipped right out of that whole labyrinth where they try to blast her with love bombs or fake figures and different things like that. They said, no, just go do your thing. Now, we have to bear in mind, once again, this is an NDE. NDEs are fraught with manipulation. This could also be a we just have to acknowledge, I'm not saying that I think that's what this is, because it sounds so unique, and also this idea of all these entities being blocked. But there, we do have to acknowledge the possibility that perhaps this was a manipulation, and they knew the other types of manipulations wouldn't work, so they created some realm that imitated maybe whatever you might think of as the Pleroma or something else, and that's where she was. And so it was still just a deeper manipulation. Could that be? I don't know. I don't feel like that's what happened, but I just want to throw that out there as a potential option of why she experienced what she experienced. Now, next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about why this specifically could have been the Pleroma, as mentioned in Gnosticism.
I felt like I was sitting there trying to deliberate where I would go and what I would create, because I knew I could. I knew it was that place, and that's what I was thinking. Like, just what do I create? Where do I go? What do I, what do I do? But there was no fear attached to it at all, and it felt like it felt like oneness. Because when you think you're in some dark universe where there's no light, there's nothing, it's just pure dark, and you're alone in that, you think it's terrifying. Because I had an experience when I was younger that I did slip in the void, and it's the negative void attached to the simulacrum, and that was horrifying. It was one of the worst experiences ever, but it was nothing like that. So even though I was so low, I wasn't afraid, and I felt like complete.
I don't know. Sounds like maybe something adjacent to the Pleroma or the Pleroma itself. I'm not super familiar with what she's talking about, slipping into the void of the simulacrum. Is that something that is created where you're in complete isolation? That's a part of the simulacrum when you pass on, and a place that some people end up in. I don't know. I need to do more research on that. But yeah, to me, that's kind of what it sounds like. Sounds like she's in the presence maybe of Source. She's saying she feels a oneness. Not to say that she's talking about merging in any way, but that's what it appears to sound like to me. How she was able to get there, or why, or has she, she mentions that her memory wasn't wiped, and maybe she has a particular mission. I don't know. Maybe has something unique about her where she is just going to kind of zip right out and is able to bypass all those barriers. Could that be? I'm not sure, but anyways, I thought that was fascinating. Now, well, here's the other part, right? He asked her, was she forced to come back? And she does say yes. Now, this is the part that's interesting. Because usually we hear in the NDEs people being forced back or thrown back into their body. And what it sounds like is the Archon saying, hey, you should go back. No, I don't want to go back, but it's best for you. No, I don't want to. Okay, now you're going, and kind of getting forced back from the Archons. But she's not saying that's the force or entities that was pushing her back in. It was, I think, the actual source that wanted her to go back to fulfill her mission. So it gets a little, I don't know. You decide for yourself as to what this force may or may not have been in terms of sending her back.
So did you choose to come back, or were you forced?
No, I was forced.
How'd that happen?
So I'm in that place, and I'm kind of figuring out what I could create and where I could go, and pretty happy about it. And then there was an energy that came in, and the energy was really strong, and it felt like a magnet, and it was pulling me, and I could feel it. The best way I could describe it is a magnet. And I heard somebody speaking, but I don't know, like, it was just like words that said, it's not your time, basically, right? And I was fighting the magnetism because I really didn't want to go back in. And it felt like a complete pull back in. And with it came a lot of visuals that were about me just coming back to do what I'm here to do and to just complete it. But the visuals were like, they were really fast. Everything was really fast as the magnet was pulling me back in. And the magnet got stronger and stronger as I was being pulled until I couldn't keep from being pulled in. And then when I got back in the body, it was really a bad impact. So it actually felt like I was coming in with a big impact in the body, which actually, I guess they were resuscitating me for a while, and I wasn't coming out of it until that happened, until I was jolted back in the body. So at that point, that's when I, came back and just was like crying and in pain because my lungs felt it felt like I had shards and needles and swords in it from the salt water being in your lungs for a while, which took weeks to recover. Like, it was hard to breathe. But I was, pretty devastated.
Oof, sounds terrible. Okay, well, watching this again now a second time, it does sound it does kind of sound like that kind of similar theme we hear with the archons, and also with this idea of the magnet. Obviously, magnet when you pass on, and the magnet pulling you into the white light. This the same idea of magnetism, and then the same idea of, no, you're not finished yet, and other NDEs you have to go back and you have more to fulfill. Right now, I don't know. And this is just a piece of the whole video, okay? And we just have to take everything with a grain of salt. This is what a lot of folks have mentioned about NDEs. They have to be careful because they're singular accounts. They're not corroborated, and singular individuals could be susceptible to manipulation. But that part sounds kind of similar to other NDEs. Nope, there's more for you to do. They show you what you have to do. Maybe that's programming and they send her back. I don't know. Could that be the case? Or could she really have a different type of mission than the rest of us, or something like that? And it was the source, or something else that was a positive entity that forced her back in. I don't know. It's just those other elements too being slammed in so aggressively. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there. Food for thought. Okay, next. Things couldn't enter that place. And again, this is that same idea that wherever she was, she seemed to be protected or insulated from the negative entities. If true, it goes back to this idea that we may have it backwards. We're not the ones that are trapped. It's the other ones. It's the negative entities that are actually trapped here. We're actually able to, once we are able to do whatever we need to do, to leave. They are not. So the rulers of the realm that seem to be in control are actually trapped. I mean, just an idea. Just an idea. All right, check this out.
Through the whole experience, I didn't see a single being or person or anything. I felt like in a weird psychic way that everything couldn't enter in that place. So whatever forces we have operating here, the dark principalities, the demonic principalities, the AI, all of it couldn't enter there. But I could feel almost like they want to access that place.
Yeah. I mean, so that's what it sounds like to me. Want to access it, want to escape, want to go there, want to get there, but they're not allowed. They're not able to cross over. And so there's our saving grace. Okay, moving on to the next clip. She talks about the fact that she wasn't mind wiped. Doesn't go into a crazy amount of detail, but explains that she wasn't, and specifically why she wasn't mind wiped coming into this incarnation.
How did you become aware of your pre-birth memories?
Well, it wasn't that I became aware. It was that I came in remembering. And there was something that happened where it was allotted that I would remember because it had to do with why I came in. So I was told that there would be certain things done to ensure that I wouldn't be mind swiped, and that I would retain the memories and use that, because if I didn't have that, it would be really hard to complete.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that, because if we make these pre-birth contracts and then we come in with amnesia, how are we supposed to fulfill them?
Well, that's what I always wondered, because I think everybody does an amazing job to get to where they're at, considering that they've like mind swiped you time after time after time after time. So it's almost like you're following um a compass that you feel but you don't know is there. You don't know anything about it, but it's like a feeling, and that compass gives you a direction. And I think that's how you end up landing, that you end up doing what you're meant to do. But I do think that like I always say, that the primes and the reals fight and have fought to struggle for their memory every lifetime that they're here.
As I'm listening to this now, I didn't feel this way the first time I listened to it. But now that I'm listening, she's talking about a pre-birth plan. She said that she was told to fulfill her purpose, which kind of, I think a lot of us are given this idea of purpose, but it's a manipulation. That in order to fulfill her purpose, she was not going to have her mind swiped or swiped as she put it. Now it's making me wonder if this was actually a plan embedded from negative forces made to seem as positive forces. And so she was told, and maybe her memory legitimately wasn't wiped. But right, like I would think that if it was coming from another place outside of the system, they would say, okay, normally to enter the system, you have to undergo the mind wipe, but we're going to prevent it. We found a way because, and we're going to prevent it, as opposed to, right? Because who would be saying we're not going to mind swipe you? Because otherwise that would mess up your mission. The ones in charge of the mind swiping, right? Now I'm having a whole different feeling about this. Again, this is not a attack on her authenticity whatsoever, or her account or anything like that. But now I'm just wondering, as we have to wonder with NDEs and these personal accounts, what they're told or what they're being led to believe is it legit? Can they even rely on it? Or unfortunately, have they become a victim of some sort of manipulation? I don't know. But man, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, oof. Either way, there's still a lot of great stuff in this interview, a lot of great things, a lot of great nuggets that I want to still show you guys, regardless of whatever the truth might be in terms of why she's here, who put her up to it. Was it, I guess you could say, the good guys or the bad guys or whatever in terms of her mission. Now, she now talks about NPCs. This is a topic that we talked about with Intuitive Underground and also mentioned in other videos. Also, I think mentioned Empty the Cave as well. Heidi McCoskey talks about NPCs. So in this clip, she talks about NPCs in the simulacrum theater, as she calls it. Very interesting. Check this out.
So in this simulacrum, we have the stage set up for interface with non-real people, so non-player characters, backdrops, right?
Right.
And that's there for us. But there's a finite number of primes and reals that I believe have been here from the start of this. And that finite number is the number that keeps coming back. It doesn't get bigger or smaller. It's the same. And everything else is sort of the simulacrum theater created. So, on the one side, you can look at it as the simulacrum is a program designed to keep you here and keep you believing in karma and all this stuff, because then you get to be recycled over and over again like a factory. But ultimately, on the higher level, you can look at the simulacrum as a place that, regardless of wherever you're at, you're a divine being that is eternal and infinite. And even if you were here for 1 billion years, it's nothing to where you are at as your higher being. So that may be an experience that you're going to take and evolve with it. So on that level, it works out in the end. On this level, it's like, oh my God, I'm trapped here. I can't get out. Right? I just keep being recycled over and over again. This has got to stop. And you've got like the evil agenda of the Khazars, the Cabal. You've got all that happening. So yeah, it is a trap system for sure. You've got everything in a net. But then you've got to go higher than that, in that place where there is no time and where you're already a perfect being, giving yourself this experience, and ultimately you aren't going to be trapped.
Nice message, great takeaway. I should mention too, I think that's important for us to bear in mind. She's talking about billions of years. We could think billions of years, trillions of years, larger quantities. Compared to infinity, those are effectively nothing. And I know that's hard for people to wrap their minds around that, but that is the case. You can't really understand infinity because it's almost not real. It's everything shrinks to zero. This is basic calculus when you think about limits. The concept of limits, if you remember that from calculus. But yeah, everything is zero in comparison to infinity, even trillions of years. So that's a fascinating way to think about this. As dire as a particular situation might feel, trapped for hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions years, it's nothing compared to infinity. We will get out is the overarching message that I'm taking away from this. Now, also, she mentions the number of reals, and I can't remember, she had another term for it. Those are, I think, she's referring to the real individual souls that have the divine spark. She later on says, when pressed about what's the number of reals, she says 33.3%, 1/3 of the population. But the way she's framing NPCs here, and I don't know what the right definition is or what the case is, it's a little bit different than Howdy McCoskey, for example, who says NPCs, it's still souls, just disconnected from the divine spark. It's almost like she's describing them as almost like programs that are part of the matrix, that are encoded, that are literally devoid of any sort of soul entity occupying it. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting, as we've been talking a lot about NPCs and what that exactly means. Now, he asked her who sets up the matrix here. I thought this was interesting as well.
Simulacrum.
Well, that's a good question. So, I mean, we can look at the Demiurge, right? We can look at the Archons. We can look at the story of creation where Sophia got pregnant, but it was a mistake, so she miscarried. And because she is the divine mother of creation, she couldn't really miscarry because it couldn't die, because she is creation. So even though her body miscarried something, it could not be killed, but it was in a death state. And so that being, which, they call Yaldabaoth, is the being that, in his rejection and abandonment and hatred of the mother, created this and created the Demiurge, the Archons, and the different principalities to rule the solar system, which is a machine. And that became the machine, the simulacrum. And the simulacrum, if you look at how it is, there's an imprint of the simulacrum of abandonment, rejection, fear of being alone, needing to be loved, looking for love. Like, it's imprinted from the mind, I believe, of that miscarriage, that because he is of the divine essence of the creator, couldn't die, but in his rage, created this. So
this is, of course, the Gnostic narrative, the Gnostic creation story. And I wonder too, when we talk about Sophia, when we talk about Yaldabaoth or the Demiurge, is there some symbolism here? Does Yaldabaoth actually represent a collection of entities or something that is this rejected, that is considered this singular entity that has been rejected or cast away or something like that? So anyways, these are just idea or questions that I have. Is this some sort of representation as opposed to representing specific individuals? I don't know. The other thing is that I wonder how this all links back up to this idea of base reality. Somebody mentioned in the chat today that she has talked about base reality as well, the same way that Intuitive Underground has talked about the base reality. Obviously, a place where it's kind of like Earth, but the real Earth. This is a projection, and that where people are linked up and their consciousness is projected into this virtual simulation. the simulacrum as she describes, but I didn't hear her mention it in this interview. So I'd be curious to know what her thoughts of this concept of base reality is and how it fits into the creation story of Gnosticism and, you know, everything else that she's been talking about. Okay, next. Now here, this is very interesting. She's saying that where we're at right now is this is our evolution to eventually effectively stop this trap. Let's hear what she has to say.
There is, like I say, you know, a finite number of actual prime real beings, and they will all witness it. And part of this is our evolution to finally stop this machine, this trap system machine, so that we can evolve the way that it was meant and designed to in creation from the beginning, that the counterfeit reality actually stole. And because it stole that, nobody, all the primes and the reals haven't been able to evolve the way that they were designed to. Even right down to a rudimentary level of aging and death. So that was never in the DNA here. The DNA was that your cells would regenerate and you would live for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands. That, you know, you wouldn't be sick, you wouldn't have sickness. So all that was a part of this hijacking that happened to keep everybody in a very small, tiny little square of reality, where they would take you, recycle you, swipe you, and you know, if you were lucky, you get to live to be 90.
We've heard this concept before, that a lot of the concepts from the New Age folks, love and light, and we're meant to just learn lessons, that is not completely false. We've heard this from other folks, that that is kind of maybe how it was intended to be, or there's other realities where that is actually the case. Here, that is professed, but it is actually not happening, obviously, because of the memory wipe and different other elements that have been incorporated in to keep us locked in this cyclic existence, this loop forever and ever, where we can't really grow because memory wipe, short lives. And then also all the while this is happening, extraction of energy is taking place. But anyways, I thought it is fascinating that she's mentioning eventually we're evolving to a place where we're destroying that, we're breaking out of the trap, and then can get back to what this is supposed to be all about, which is true learning and growth and evolution. So there's some truth to these ideas that we maybe think are false or manipulations. Yeah, maybe here, but beyond this, back in normalcy and normal reality, there is truth to it. And maybe that's the power of that deception, that tool of deception, thinking, hey, everything is a lesson, it's all for you. It's like, yeah, maybe on some level, not right now, not the way it's coming to us and the way it's being presented to us here, but yeah, it's somewhere at some level, that's what incarnation is meant to be. Now this is crazy. This is straight up Matrix Neo, right? She's talking. He asked, "Can we manipulate the simulacrum?" And she says, "Yes." And that's what it reminds me of when Neo gets the powers. He sees the code and he's able to fly and do all sorts of crazy stuff. Let's check this out.
Do you think it's possible that we can learn how to manipulate the simulacrum for our own advantage?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, you know, the way I feel it is that the simulacrum, just like the archons in the Demiurge, which could all be, well, they're all the one and the same thing, right? They work with your psyche. So just like they're lower astral realms, that means that there's lower astral realms to people. So people function on the subconscious and the unconscious more than they function on the conscious. AKA, they create more from their subconscious and unconscious than they do with their conscious. This force, I feel, goes right into your psyche and will produce what's in that unconscious and subconscious state, AKA your astral lower worlds. And then it produces a theater specially made for you to live in that reality. So once you understand how to get more of your conscious, unconscious, subconscious in control, so that you cannot have these programs and spells running of destruction, self-destruction, chaos, and all this, you know, that like Yaldabaoth negative stuff that he had. Once you learn how to do that, I feel like it has a harder time engaging with you because you're now a conscious creator. You've taken control of your subconscious and unconscious, and whatever's in there in those spells that you have running and programs, you change them so that they reflect the positive, they reflect, you know, your creation ability, not your subconscious destruction horror movie. So I totally believe you can do that.
What are the practical ways of doing that?
I think some of the best practical ways to do that is to know what your subconscious programs and spells are. I think that you have to become conscious of all that running narratives that go through your brain and your mind that you're being influenced, whether it's coming from you, your lower astral realms, the demonic principalities, the negative energies, the AI, giving you those negative thoughts. You need to know what they are. And you need to be conscious of exactly everything your brain thinks of so that you can turn those around completely. And, you know, I always say go like Zen Buddhist and just wipe that completely clean. Make a choice to believe in the positive because you're a piece of heaven here. So it can't be done through the negative. It can't be done through you believing in the negative spells that you tell yourself every day because a simulacrum is just going to create that.
I like that message a lot. I mean, obviously, for a number of reasons. Number one, it's talking about this idea of us empowering ourselves in this reality and the potential of that. But also, two, this notion of sticking with the positive. I know that other folks have said that, hey, look, you can't just, that's kind of one of the traps of the new age ideas is we just ignore the negative and only think positive and blah, blah, blah. This is going to be great. And we just tune it out. And that's not really, it's avoidance. It's not really acknowledging a lot of things that might be happening and also signing off on too much negativity and saying, oh, well, it's okay. It's part of the plan. And I get that. But I think what she's talking about here is a little bit different. I think what she's talking about is your own negative thoughts, how to deal with those, how to not exactly quiet, but redirect that little voice inside your head that's a negative Nancy or that's gnawing at you, telling yourself you're not good enough, and instead bolstering yourself with some positive thinking, positive messaging. I mean, I love that stuff. I think that is so beneficial to people also, just, I mean, outside of this entire world, just in general, trying to look at things in an empowering way. I think that's great. And now she's talking about it from this vantage point of it actually being the key to empowering us to unlock whatever abilities, dormant abilities we may have. I just think that part's pretty cool. Now she talks about the movie The Matrix, which, as I think we've all come to accept, that movie has a whole lot of truth in it. It's weird, but it really does. That's why I think so many of us just fell in love with that movie when we first saw it. I think we sensed some truth to it. Now, what he asks is, well, if there's so much truth in the Matrix and the ideas behind it, the ideas that we're being used as power sources, the idea that we're in a simulacrum, all this stuff is described so eloquently and so spot on, obviously in a fictional abstract way, but still in that movie, why was that movie made? Why was it allowed to be made and shown to us so that some of us could look at it and maybe have some revelations? Well, she explains.
I feel like most people haven't thought about the simulacrum before the movie The Matrix came out. Why do you think that movie was released?
I believe it's because they have to follow the law and they have to reveal what their plans are. If they don't, they accrue too much karma, and there's no way they want that. So the law states, well, you have to give the people the information and let them decide for themselves. And you can put it in any format you want, right? So I believe that releasing that kind of information is the responsibility of these elite families, and that, let's just say, the rulers of this world, that for their agenda, it's important for them, because if they follow the law, they'll get further ahead in their agenda than if they don't. And that's the reason, along with karma, that they do it. So they will release the information. And it works out, well, they think it works.
They think it works out best for them, is what she was saying. I've heard this before. I need to get somebody on this channel to talk about this rule, this law, where it originates from. But this idea that it kind of goes in line with the law of free will. Like, you have to allow people, you have to give them the information so they're still actively choosing to be a part of the system. And if you don't, then it's a violation potentially, perhaps, of this law. But it's the same reason why I think a lot of truths are buried in movies or buried in advertising or different things like that. And it kind of has to be there, but then it's made to be ridiculous or funny, or haha, yeah, of course, the Matrix. Oh, you're saying we're in a simulacrum? You just saw that in a movie, right? It's made to, and so that's why you're thinking it's like, no, the movie is actually depicting reality, and we're presenting it to you so we can showcase what's happening, abiding by this law of free will. So then you're being shown, you're choosing to ignore it. Okay, but that's up to you. But now you're still buying into the system. And anyways, so this seems to be potentially what is the mechanism or means by which this information is passed to us, so that it's almost like a signing off on some sort of implicit contract of saying, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, because now I saw it, but I'm just not believing it. I'm not acknowledging it, but I saw it. That's good enough. So you can keep doing what you're doing, type of situation. I thought this was fascinating. But yeah, I'd love to have somebody on the channel talk about this rule in particular and see if we can dig into the history of it, or how people learned of it, or what is it called even. Anyways, fascinating stuff. Now, this is very interesting. Okay. We are descending. That sounds negative, but she means it in a positive way, as opposed to the traditional way of saying, hey, we are ascending, we are improving, we are enlightening. No. She says, don't call it ascending. We're descending. We're descending within ourselves, within us, to that divine spark that resides within us. We don't need to ascend anywhere external. Descend within us.
I believe that it's not really ascension. That's like the problem. That's what the simulacrum wants you to do. It wants you to go out and go up. I think we have to go down and in. So I call it descension. So really, it's about going, because the universe is within you and you are the universe. Okay? You are the infiniverse, I like to say. It's all in you. You're a reflection of the Mother and the Father Divine. You are a reflection of everything. Everything is in you. So I like to say we're descending. We're going in. We're going down. Because the simulacrum wants you to go ascend.
I just thought that was a fascinating point. Again, goes back to that line from Christ, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Goes back to the idea that we don't need a savior. We don't need to look up to help. We're right here and able to help ourselves, because we are that powerful. And that's ultimately, that's all we need. That's all we're looking for, is just ourselves. And we can rest and rely on that. All of these kind of messages converge with this idea of, no, not ascension, descension within us, to unleash us, to unlock us, and get to wherever we are trying to go. That's it, guys. That's all I got for you on this video about Lauda Leon. A lot of interesting stuff, a lot of good nuggets here, a lot of things still to be cautious about. I'd love to have her on the channel at some point. It'd be really cool to interview her. But I think, as some of these folks, these other remote viewers and others have mentioned, I think we have to bear this in mind, that we do have to be cautious when listening to near-death experience accounts, these kind of singular accounts that don't have corroboration from multiple sources and multiple angles. And the more I think about some of the things that she's mentioned, I'm wondering if there's an element of deception that she's just not aware of, or maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. And maybe that it was all the real deal. She's feeling everything from the right place and the right source. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.